Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, making a big old chisel. So today, a semi-departure from knife making, forging a framing chisel. I guess you'd call it a framing chisel, but more on that later. Now, I've been working on a new workbench for my shop, and I was going to use this chisel to clean up mortises during that build, but I got the workbench done before I got the chisel done. Oh well. You know, part of the fun of being a knife maker is making other tools for the shop. So I've been doing a little woodworking for fun lately, and so, yeah, chisel. All right, let's get cranking. I'm forging the chisel from this piece of 3/4 inch Hitachi 1084 round bar. Why 1084? Because I had a piece sitting here. Plus, Hitachi, that just sounds like a chisel, man. Forging chisels, frankly, is not the most challenging thing in the world of bladesmithing. A beginning smith should be able to get the general idea, which is one of the cool things about this project. I'm just widening the round bar a little bit, then drawing and flattening the blade. Then I'll neck it down a little on my press to form what technically is known as the bolster. Obviously I'm using my hydraulic press for a lot of this, but with a little elbow grease you can do all of this with a hammer. I've made plenty of chisels just with the hammer. Forging a little bevel. And that basically is it. After forging, I tested out my new touch mark. If you're curious how I made the touch mark, I did a video on it a week or so ago. That first touch mark didn't go very well. Nothing wrong with the tool, I just didn't hit it hard enough, so the touch mark looks kind of crummy. Next step, I'll normalize the steel 3 times at about 1600 degrees. Then it's on over to the belt grinder to get rid of the scale and shape the business end of the tool. Again, compared to making a knife, this is really fairly routine grinding. You could do this with a file, you can do it on a really small 1x30 belt grinder. Very simple. All I'm trying to do here is make everything clean and even. Quick plug here, if you enjoyed this build and you want to get plans with all the dimensions for the chisel, I've got them. Everybody who helps out the channel on Patreon gets access to my full library of plans and designs. See the cards and description for links. Just getting started on your knife journey, I've also got a free downloadable PDF to help you get airborne. Same deal, cards and description. Okay, back to work. The trickiest part of the grinding, other than a step we'll take later, is grinding the tang, which is the part that will be enclosed in the handle. I'll grind away with 35 grit, measuring to get it just a hair under 1/2 inch so that it'll slide into a 1/2 inch hole in the handle. Here's a fun trick. It helps even out the grind so the tang's reasonably symmetrical, which is always a little bit of a challenge when you're grinding things to a cylindrical shape. I was able to get the concentric error down to about 5 or 10 thousandths just by freehand, which is plenty good enough for something like this. I've done this on a metal lathe before, which gets it down to a thou of run out or lack of concentricity, whatever you want to call it, but that's just doing something precise to do something precise. It's not demanded by the tool. Getting a clean shoulder here is the main trick. I'm going to file it. Now, time for heat treating. I'll be heating the chisel to about 1500 degrees and then quenching it in Parks 50, a fast engineered quenching oil. I always like to give a quick test of forged blades by scraping them with the corner of a file. You want the file to just skate over the surface, indicating that the hardening process did what it was supposed to do. At the very end of the blade, it bites in a little, indicating that this is where the hardened part of the chisel ends. I want the bolster and tang to be soft and shock resistant, whereas I want the blade to be nice and hard, so that worked out just perfectly. Then it's into the tempering oven at about 375 Fahrenheit to lessen the brittleness of the steel. Now I'll turn a handle on my wood lathe. I'm just hacking off a piece from some scrap walnut. If you're curious to know what distinguishes a framing chisel from any other chisel, well, basically it's just a big ol' honkin' chisel designed to be driven with a hammer or mallet. A framing chisel is not a mortising chisel, which is much fatter. And yet, making mortises is supposedly one of the main uses of framing chisels. So, honestly, it seems like chisel terminology is a little vague sometimes. Much like knife making terminology, I guess. If you don't believe me, ask 5 different knife nerds what a choil is. Anyway, a little sanding. A homemade beeswax and linseed oil mixture to pretty it up. Then I'll part it off and drill a hole for the tang. I've made a fair number of chisels by now, and I always find it hard to get a really well centered, really concentric hole. The way to do it right would be to make a jig, but I'm not gonna. I make a chisel about once a year, so not worth the effort. I think the trick was using a Forstner bit. In the past, I probably used spade bits, and those always kind of shake around and you have a hard time holding a really clean hole. But Forstner bits will really drive a nice, clean, straight hole. Perfectly concentric hole. If you have a tight hole in cases like this, it's good to drill a tiny hole to let air escape. Otherwise, in effect, you've created a pneumatic piston, and the tang won't go in for love or money. After tempering, I'll clean up the chisel on the grinder, this time using much finer grit belts. I'll also relieve the back of the chisel with a large contact wheel. The purpose of this hollow grind on the rear of the chisel is to leave a thin margin on the back to make sharpening easier. This is common on Japanese woodworking tools, less so on Western tools. You can do it or not, it's fine either way. Japanese guys have these enormous stone wheels, so they get a really shallow relief, but the principle's the same whatever the radius. It still works. Now I'll just dab a little epoxy in there and drive it on in. Now there's nothing left to do but sharpen it and start chiseling wood. You know, I tend to get lower views anytime I do woodworking related projects, but I do them anyway. To me, one of the coolest things about being a knife maker is that you learn a lot of skills that you can apply, you know, outside of knife making. So the more skill you gain in woodworking, the better your knives. Plus, it's fun. Hey, by the way, I always do a year-end viewer knife video, so if you've made a knife and you want to share it with the world, just shoot me some photos. Check the description for details of where to send them. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you soon. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. You know, I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.